Okay, so I researched English and the American Dream, and I basically looked at how the English language is a pivotal point in someone's success in America. When we look at Frederick Douglass, who was a former slave and a very well-respected author, he made the connection early on in slavery that knowledge equals freedom. And for people who don't know the English language in America, it can sometimes provide a roadblock to that equation that Frederick Douglass set up. He knew that he needed to be able to read to be able to gain his freedom. And so that begs the question, to what extent does a lack of proficiency in English limit the American dream? The cornerstone of the American dream is liberty and freedom. And now I'm going to tell you a little story about Jimmy. Jimmy was a participant in a study done by Jennifer Diaz-Zamora, who was trying to gain her master's in science and education at the Dominican University of California. She looked at certain students who were struggling in EL programs, English learner programs, and Jimmy was a particular student who was struggling in all of his classes as a whole, not just English, his EL classes. He was struggling in all of them because he couldn't comprehend the texts, he couldn't look at them with a more capable eye because of the English language. It was too immersive for him. Therefore, he was left behind and was reading about 6th grade levels below his own. The ACLU report looked at an area in California, the San Diego area, because of prompts like Jennifer Diaz-Zamora's study, where she looked at the San Francisco Bay Area. Well, the ACLU said California has a problem. And they found that 35 school districts, and even though the ACLU is a very liberal very liberal interest group, they asked these schools, straight up, what is going on here? Do you provide English learner services, and who do you provide them to? And they found that 35 school districts provide no EL services to more than 100 students. So there's obviously a problem here, but where does it lie? And there's a communication gap. For these kids to be able to learn, they need these programs, but they can't be too immersive, otherwise it will result in these bad grades like Jimmy. Now, looking at it through an ethical lens, Scott King attempted to bridge this gap by bringing into Congress the English Language Unity Act. And this English Language Unity Act said that all immigrants needed to be able to read governmental texts in the English language. And this is the wrong idea. This is the absolute worst case scenario. Because for immigrants to be told that they need to do something, it recalls archaic views on assimilation that are temporary and unethical. These people are coming to the country for our American dream, and what we're doing is actually winding back the American dream. We're essentially reeling them in and then taking it away. And here's a comic for an example. Someone's talking about English should be the national language. Someone says, well, when you go to live somewhere, you learn the language. And someone says, excuse me, but Asio Sarah Dewado. And what the hell was that? Cherokee. And it shows that we're not even, the English language is not even the foundation of our culture in this country. It's what connects us. But to ask immigrants to do something that is supposed to be our foundation is wrong because we are a melting pot. We must meet in the middle. So Scott King's English Language Unity Act was totally wrong. It asked immigrants to go the distance. What we need to do, whether it's less immersive programs, bilingual programs, we need to really bridge this gap together with people who are not as proficient in the English language as native speakers are. So those are my references, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.
How did your research question evolve as you moved through the research process? Did your research go in a different direction than you originally planned?
It actually did. I started out with a really broad scope. I really just looked at the immigrant identity, and looking at that was very difficult, so I decided to narrow it. I decided to put a focus on what connects us as a group. And when I found that the English language does, I was really interested, and I found that it was difficult for me to think about the English language being a connector without looking at it through an ethical lens, because we are a nation of immigrants. I descend from immigrants, you descend from immigrants, the native people are really the only ones who have been here, so we need to respect cultures.
What advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic?
I would give the advice that to narrow your scope early on, because I looked in particular at California. Because California, while I figured it's a very good gauge of the population as a whole, it's most populous, even looking, it has the most electoral votes. We have to look at, what is gonna be representative, and to narrow in my scope on California first before making a connection as a whole to the country was, I think, a very good idea.
Thanks.